So you just heard the text, so I encourage you to, when you get home, to read this scripture that's written, John 12, 1 through 8, as it prepares us for these next few weeks coming ahead. But we'll just hop right into the sermon. Let us pray. Holy God, we thank you for this place, this space where we can wrestle with your scriptures. We ask that you open our ears and our hearts and our minds so that we might be able to hear how it is that you're speaking to us. And now may the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. So a friend of mine bought a house a few years ago, and after she purchased it, her dad had come into town that first week to help make a few changes to better fit the needs of her family before they officially moved in a few weeks later. The most obvious renovation that he made was this big hole in the wall that he put between the dining room and the kitchen. The wall was very much intact when he started, but it just kind of interrupted the flow of this room. So my friend had asked him to make it into a wide doorway between these rooms to kind of open up the space and to close off a narrower original doorway on the side. Now, I am not a construction worker, never have I been, so I was very fascinated to get to watch this transformation of this place come about. I know my eyes were like super wide when I first walked into that room after some of the wall had been knocked down, exposing the wall's ribs and the tendon-like electrical wires that are going through that space. It was amazing to see the growing dust and the particles of wall litter this floor as more light made its way through the space that once was a wall. Now, my friend, who tends to appreciate order, didn't find it as thrilling as I did. She started getting a bit anxious about this huge mess her dad was making that had spilled way past the protective tarp that he laid down beforehand. Even with the doors closed in the other rooms, the mess was spreading everywhere in whatever way it pleased. And even though this work was necessary to create the space that would better fit her family's needs, she was completely unaware of the anxiety that would come along with this process. And I don't blame her though, because the work on the wall did seem to come to a standstill when her dad had encountered this unexpected problem and took a few days to figure out how to fix it. There was no turning back at this point, and I think she began to wonder if her dad was even going to be able to finish this project before they were able to move in. So many times, right, we get anxious when we're faced with renovation that's reflected in our lives, right? Especially during Lent. We see places and spaces that can be improved within ourselves, where we can make adjustments for a happier and healthier life. We envision how life might be with this desired change that we have. We look at the before picture and we try our best to imagine the after. And sometimes that's where we stop. The messy part of construction, the tearing down, dust creating, anxiety producing work of construction is not something many of us want in our lives. We know that there are changes we could make, but we're often so terrified to take that step and start doing our internal construction. Even knowing that the work may very well bring us into closer communion with God, knowing that the hole in the wall will create a beautiful room, we still fear the idea that the construction happens at all. It's not uncommon to experience anxiety in the midst of transition and turmoil. Like the Israelites throughout many times in their lives, and particularly when they've been in exile, for so many years, removed from their customs and specific ways of doing things. It makes plenty sense that they were experiencing a bit of anxiety too. They were a people who were perhaps beginning to lose hope in their grim situation that seemed to have no end. Families were separated, the temple was destroyed, their whole nation and all their systems within it were torn apart. They were in captivity and had been for many years. Some of them were probably spending time reminiscing about the good old days before disaster struck. Others of them may have even been replaying in their somewhat recent history how they might have acted differently to prevent this long and tragic time of exile. Would they ever make it back home? And if so, would they be able to remember how they used to do things and pick back up where they left off? And this is where Isaiah comes in with a word of hope to a people who no longer had any. Isaiah reminds them of how God has repeatedly delivered them from different situations. He reminds them specifically of how God made a way through the mighty waters and saved them from Pharaoh's oppressive rule. He reminds them of how God provided for them in the wilderness and brought them to safety once more. And then he shares an important reminder and an invitation. Forget the events of the past. Ignore the things of long ago. Look, I am doing something new. Now it springs forth. Can't you see it? It's not that Isaiah is saying to actually forget the past. I mean, he literally just spent time reminding them of all of God's saving powers in some of their most unfortunate situations. I think he's speaking more of this human tendency toward clinging onto a past that cannot be changed, a past that can never be duplicated. How can a people redeemed and brought forth by God's very hand not be transformed? There's no way they can continue to be who they used to be when God's undying love, hope, and redemption have graced their lives. When we hang on to what has been, surely Isaiah is warning that we too are going to miss all the new and great things God is doing in our lives now and in the time to come. The power of those things that have passed must be broken for us to realize God's power in our now and in our yet to be. And over this congregation, this message needs to land differently. Y'all have a long history and a rich tradition of staying ready to respond to the community's shifting needs. This has been and is a place where change is no stranger. And it's at that very same posture that can inform how we remember the past and seeing God's activity that'll help free us for perceiving this yet unknown new thing that God has in store for us. Instead of losing our way during this time of change in this new space and new neighborhood, we're boldly embarking on this journey to embrace the sense of our changing call. And in May, we're going to begin seriously examining what it means to be a partner in ministry here in Ypsi. We live in a community of change, a community that's longing for that new thing. God is doing a new thing, and it's springing forth now. Can we see it? As we do this hard work before us of rediscovering who God is calling us to be in this time and place, will we be stuck unsuccessfully hanging on to our past accomplishments and completely miss the newness God is springing forth? Or will we be open to the messiness that comes with receiving God's undying love, transformative hope, and redemptive grace, which is made available to us and those around us? It's been several years now, and the new opening in the wall at my friend's house turned out to be a very great choice. The foot traffic moves way better. The light and the energy in the room both flow more freely. The space feels less cramped. And during that whole process, there are two noteworthy things that I discovered. One, even as the place was in its most disheveled state, as her dad demolished bits of what used to be, he was also moving forward with a new vision of something better. Yes, it definitely left a whole bunch of mess all over the place, and it created anxiety in my friend, but the promise of something new and better was just beyond the worst of it. And two, even as the walls came down, the integrity of the place remained intact, and the structure stood firmly in place. And those are my prayers for us as we go about demolishing the things that need to come down and wade through the resulting mess. We're probably gonna do and say things that annoy each other. Yup. We're not gonna agree on every last detail. We're gonna stir up some dust that moves beyond the places we felt ready to change. But I also know that God is already in the mix of this renovation of our ministry. The very foundation of our beliefs are still intact and will remain firmly in place, even as many other things are moving and being replaced. So let us live boldly into our decision to move here and respond to the call that is yet ahead of us. And know that even as things feel disheveled and the things we used to know are becoming demolished, God is already working in this place and moving forward with a new vision of something better. So I want to leave us with two questions that I would love for all of us to actually answer in this week. So you get your I swear I can speak. As you get your writing utensils out to write down these questions, I'll let you know what I'd like for you to do. Whether you've been here for decades or just a few weeks, I want everyone to please answer these two questions individually. And once you've answered these two questions, I would love for you to email them to me. Does everybody have access to email? Yeah, perfect. So after you answer these questions, I'd love for you to type them out and send them back to me this week. If you need help along the way, I'm sure many of us can help out as needed, but if you really prefer to keep it handwritten, feel free to bring those on Sunday. So I'd like for all of us to do this by next week. So y'all ready for the questions? Okay. What is one thing in First Congo's past that shows you personally how God has been active? I'll repeat it. What is one thing in First Congo's past that shows you personally how God has been active? Now that could be something that you've experienced firsthand or something you heard about that was important to your being here. But don't overthink it. In fact, the first things that come to mind are likely the very things I'd love for us to explore. The second question may take a bit more reflection and thought. Again, I'm interested in your individual answer and your sense of feeling for this question. Where do you potentially see the new something that God is bringing forth? I'll repeat it. Where do you potentially see the new something that God is bringing forth? I want y'all to know that there are no wrong answers, just honest and true reflections. And I really love it if y'all would indulge me and we can gather these answers from each of you. I think this will help us kind of shape our priorities and what we may together be discerning as what God is calling for us to do and be in this time. So if you could please do those by Sunday, that'd be stellar, so we can be ready to go right in May. God is doing something new. Can't we see it? Amen.